Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all on behalf of Team CSP and NIAS, and also on behalf of Professor Sangeeta Menon. Thank you so much for being with us today. And without any ado, we'll just start with the introduction of our speaker of today, Dr. Saurabh Todaria. So I'll now request Meera Kumar Menon, a doctoral scholar with NIAS CSP, to give an introduction of Saurabh, sir. Meera, over to you.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Warm welcome to today's event. So today's speaker, Dr. Saurabh, is a very erudite scholar. He has completed his MPhil and PhD from the Center of Philosophy, JNU, and his specialization is in phenomenology. He has worked with Azim Premji Foundation, Delhi University, ICPR as a postdoc fellow, and is currently at NIAS. He is exploring the intersections between phenomenology and Kashmiri Shaivism. His recent publication is The Synthesis and Transcendental Ego in Kant and Husserl in JICPR, published by Springer. So we welcome you, sir. We are delighted to have you today. Over to you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone, and Meera for the generous introduction. And first of all, I would like to thank our chairperson, Professor Sangeeta Menon, who conceptualized this forum where we could share our thought on the online platform. And also would like to I would like to thank our organizers of this Friday online lectures, Niharika and Meera. So especially I also would like to thank Professor Thomas and Professor Koshi, who are one of the senior phenomenologists in India and who out of their busy schedule taking their time in attending my talk. And I thank you all for being here. So the topic of today is the phenomenology of
Sir, you're muted. Yeah.
So what we are discussing here today is actually that what is actually the phenomenology of body is, how the body is experienced, and how the experience of the body has been changed, transformed during the COVID-19 times. So this is some of the views, some of my views I would like to share with you. And also I would like to confess that this is the work in progress, not because of the gamut of this work is in itself is very wide embodiment, but also because right now we are still trying to comprehend the implication of the COVID-19 social distancing in terms of the embodiment, social relationships, and the sense of this self. So what I'll do, I have made certain PPT for that, which I would request Niharika to share with you. Niharika, hello. Okay. Niharika, can do it full screen? Hello.
Sir, it is full screen. Like.
Okay. Okay.
Is it not? Yeah.
Okay, so this is the topic, as you know, that's the phenomenology of body. So I've just taken the picture of Franz Kafka's famous story, The Metamorphosis, where the character of the story, George Samsa, he transformed into a cockroach one day, and how his life and the world and the expectations change around him. So this is just to show that how the body is experienced. So can you turn the slide, the first?
Yes. So just a minute. Yes.
Can you change the slide? Next slide.
Yes, sir. Is it okay, sir?
Next slide.
This?
No, next, this one. Next. Second slide.
So this?
Okay, one sec. In my screen,
Yes, sir.
I couldn't, I'm only getting the first slide, the introduction slide. Can you change the next slide?
Sam, I have changed the slide.
Okay, so
Just a minute, sir.
yeah, I got it now. Yeah. Okay, all right.
So just a minute. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience. So is it okay?
Yeah, one sec. Yeah. Yeah, this slide.
Yes. Okay, sir.
Yeah.
So you can please proceed with the presentation.
Yeah, I'm proceeding. One sec. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, there is some hitch. I just would take 10 seconds.
Yeah. So is it okay?
Yeah, one sec. Uh, yeah, so this is the first slide. So sorry, I'm really sorry for the interruption caused because of this technical things, and I'm doing this PPT for the first time, so that's why this is the problem. Okay, so first of all, we need to understand that what is phenomenology. So there are numerous definitions of the phenomenology, and especially and the people who are not from the philosophy and the social science. So I would just like to tell that basically has been started from the Germany with the Edmund Husserl, but later on there are so many phenomenologists, and there are different definitions of the phenomenology. But basically we can say that phenomenology is the study of the subjectivity, that how do we experience the world, what are the mode structures in which the word is experienced and makes sense. So what does this mean? That basically in our relationship with the word, we analyze the structures of the subjectivity of the self, that how the word makes sense to us. So generally it is believed that in philosophy, in the traditional philosophy, that mind is like a mirror which only reflects the word, which has been established by the Richard Rorty, famous philosopher. So that mind remains only passive in relationship to the word. So it only mirrors the word. But on the other hand, phenomenology claims that the subject plays an active role in the structuring of the experience. So subject also contribute in the construction of the experience. How? Because if we analyze, because the phenomenology is something which is based on the experience, so it says that if we analyze that there is a difference between the experience of the joy, surprise, envy, or for example, if we see a human being or when we see an object, so there is a difference between the experience of that. So we are not like the zombies, we doesn't have any rich mental life. We have a very rich mental content, because we prioritize, differentiate, distinguishes between the experience, qualifies some experience as very qualitative, and qualifying some experience as a very qualitative, while other experience doesn't have that much quality. So this means that phenomenology try to explain this from the perspective of the subject who is in the world, who is experiencing. Next slide. Yeah, so is next slide there? Yeah. Niharika?
Yes, sir. From my side, the slide has
Okay.
changed.
Okay. So this, you can see the picture of the Harry Potter, that this is a famous Harry Potter. So let us, in order to understand phenomenology, first of all, we try to understand from the very like a regular phenomena, not a regular phenomena, like the very experiential phenomena of the magic. That what is magic and how do we experience the magic? How the magic is different from our ordinary kind of the experience. So the question is that can an omniscient being experience magic? The person who knows each and everything, so can he know the magic? Can he experience the magic? No, because in order to experience the magic, there should be the surprise, wonder. So this surprise and the wonders is the essential element of magic. Without it, no magic is possible. So why we experience the magic? Because we anticipate the things and the word in a particular way, and it turns out some other way as we have not expected. For example, I'm thinking that while I will open the door, I will find a room, but I find a sea or some other different kind of the altogether different creatures. So this is, I am taken by the surprise. So this means the consciousness is something is not which is very passive with regard to the world, but it is anticipate. It projects some horizons. It projects its expectations on the world. So this shows that consciousness always projects, anticipate, and expert the things and the event around us. Next slide. Yeah. So the phenomenology basically defines the consciousness in terms of aboutness. That which is this is which Edmund Husserl says that consciousness is always the consciousness of. We always remain, there is an aboutness as to the consciousness. We always so conscious is not something which is like in the box being limited to itself. It is the something which always remain oriented towards some things. It can be an external object like the jar, table, laptop, or it can be like the feelings, like the feeling of the frustration or the feeling of the joy and the feeling of the boredom. So it will, but in any case, it will always have the intentionality. It always remain intended towards the world. So intentionality become the fundamental defining feature of the consciousness according to phenomenology. And interestingly, phenomenology says not these main phenomenologists, but the people who are the phenomenologists later on, they define that even the animals and the plants can also be defined as the conscious being because they have the intentionality. Like the animals also intend towards their surroundings, which some of the, like the recent paper by the Watt and Browning and Michael Marder, who worked on the plant phenomenology, especially the plant intentionality, so that they also remain intended towards the world. So the human being is not defined in the terms of the categories like the rationality or language, but on the basis of the intentionality of their being able to intend towards the words. Next slide. So now the question is that once we have defined that consciousness is basically the consciousness of, intentionality is the fundamental feature of the word. So our relationship the word is in the terms of the intentionality. We reach out to the word. We are not something which is like which we are in our box of the consciousness. We always reach out to the word. But the question here arises that what is the nature of this intentionality? Do we represent the word in the conceptual or propositional manner? Like I should have certain concepts about the word, that this is the jar, this is table, this is laptop. So I define the word in the conceptual manner, that I neatly distinguish the word in the clear terms of like P is Q or A is P. So some of the proponents of it are like Kant, Seller, John McDowell. So they argue that we experience the word fundamentally in the conceptual manner. So Kant, in the Critique of Pure Reason, he gives a very succinct statement that the concepts without intuitions are empty and intuitions without concepts are blind. So that we cannot, so if intuitions are not, if we don't have the concepts, and if we only have the intuitions or like the sensation, so they are blind. There can be no knowledge at that level. But phenomenology says that our everyday experience challenges this conceptual nature of the intentionality. For example, when I dance or play any musical instrument and I totally get absorbed in that. So do I need the very full-fledged concepts at that time in order to play the musical instrument or to dance, or I become the completely absorbed into that? So phenomenologists like Martin Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty, Hubert Dreifel, they call it as the skillful coping with the word. That basically we cope up with the word. So what does it mean? That our access to the word is not in the terms of the concepts, in terms of the representation, but it is like a coping. So here we have to distinguish between the two kinds of the knowledge, which is one is the knowing that and another is the knowing how. So knowing that is the kind of the theoretical knowledge in which I basically define the things in the terms of the concepts and predicate it, while in the knowing how, I just cope up with the word. Like when I ride a bicycle and I need to take the turn, so at that time, on the basis of my bodily ease, my previous knowledge, without involving any concepts, I suddenly glue to the situation. So I plug into that situation on the basis of my coping skills, which like Dreifel says that this shows this, then when the expertise is developed, then you don't need the much concepts actually. So our access to the word is fundamentally non-conceptual and pre-reflective in nature. Next slide. So this is the background basically of the phenomenology. So this background is phenomenology is needed because we want to show that our relationship the word is not in the terms of the subject-object divide. It is not the conceptual, but rather it is something pre-conceptual, pre-reflective, which is called the skillful coping. So we cope up with the word. For example, Heidegger's famous example is of the hammer. So he says that when I do the things, suppose I'm hammering something in my shop. So at that time I don't analyze the hammer. At that time I just do my work. Only when the hammer breaks, at that time it becomes an object for me. So when this laptop, when I'm working with it, everything is happening fine. So I'm just absorbed into that. At that time I don't experience that this is an object and I am the subject. We become a kind of one thing. In the event, what is called is a flow, being in the flow. So I remain in the flow, I cope up with the thing. Suppose laptop doesn't work, then it becomes an object. Then I started to analyze it. Okay, what is that? Then it's become an object for me. So first of all, we experience the things in the practical context. So theoretical context, according to Heidegger, is the derivative of the practical context. Now, the thing is that how does the body occupy the objective space? How does this body occupy this space in which we all are? Does it occupies like the toolbox in the cupboard or the being in the world? So these two pictures where one we can see there are some objects which are in the cupboard, and there are some friends which are sitting together and forming and in the simple chit chat. So basically, according to Merleau-Ponty and Heidegger, we are being in the world. So body gives us orientation in the world. In the phenomenology of perception, he says. So what is this orientation? He says, so basically we project the possibilities on the world on the basis of our body. For example, I always interpret the space as the near, far. This is on my left, this is my right. So this is like the close, this is like a far away. So this is actually on the basis of our embodied capacities, we define the word, we structure the word. So our being in the word is based on the embodied possibilities. So word is basically the embodied word, the word which has been phenomenology experienced as near and far on the basis of the embodied possibilities we have. So this possibilities is basically on the basis of our body. So when I orient in the world, so this body gives me a kind of it anchors me in the world. I say, okay, this bottle is near to me, this window is far from me. So in this way, I occupy the space. The word has become familiar. Thus, so as Merleau-Ponty says, that body becomes an attitude. The body becomes an attitude by which I know that whether I can explore some possibilities in the world or not. Next slide. So here Merleau-Ponty talks about the lived body. Now, what is the lived body? Lived body is the body which is based on our experiences. So since we have, since our childhood, our motor skills has been developed, then we got socialized. So all this experience gets sedimented on the body, which forms a kind of the lived body. So this lived body actually gives us a kind of the horizon, kind of the intentionality towards the world. So on the basis of this, my previous experience, previous embodied experience, I don't need to analyze always that this I have to do this. So suppose I have to enter into a door. So I never calculate, okay, door's measurement is that much and my measurement is this much and whether I can fit in or not. Rather, on the basis of my previous experience, I simply flow into the world, cope up with the world easily. So this has been, according to Merleau-Ponty, possible because we have the lived body where all the experience gets sedimented. So he analyzes the case through the case of the phantom limb. So as we know, in the phantom limb, the people whose one of the limb amputated, so they still feel the presence of that sensation and the presence of that limb. So why does it happen? According to Merleau-Ponty, this actually happens because in the lived body there is already the experience of that leg, because he already experienced the world on the basis of the lived body when his leg was intact. But in the present body, his leg is not there. So there is a kind of a dichotomy between, contradiction between the lived body and the present body, which is amputated. So what happens actually, on the basis of his lived experiences, he projects some possibilities on the world, that it is possible for me to stretch myself as through both of the legs, but its present body does not allow it to realize these possibilities. So this kind of the disorientation between the past and the future, where the past, where it held the possibilities, where he has already lived up that possibility, and the future experience doesn't allow it. So this is, he says, so this is what the case of the phantom limb shows, that still we need the lived body to orient us in the world. So one more example, some of the examples of the lived body, we can see that, for example, the person who is engrossed in the carpentering, he totally forgets his body on the basis of the lived body. In any kind of the performance, people totally forgets their body. Why they forget? Because the thing is that it is because their lived body is totally able to cope up with the environment. It doesn't need to calculate, because in the beginning they have to understand, learn, and to and to ingrain this new kind of the principle which their body takes time in order to internalize. But once it gets internalized in the lived body, it becomes a part of the lived experiences, then they can easily easily plug with their environment. So that is the people who are very good at in the stage, they can easily plug with the environment of the stage or the theater, because they know because their lived bodies already feel comfortable with that new environment. While the person who is the new, his lived body takes time in order to cope up with the new environment. For example, a good mood or health is also the situation where we are able to plug ourselves perfectly with the environment, where we totally plug ourselves perfectly with the environment, because in the good mood or health, I don't feel that my body is a weight. It is something like it becomes the enabling situation where I can easily cope up with my environment, and any kind of the projects which I any kind of the task which I project on the world around me can easily be realized. Similarly, in the experience of the grief and the loss which are experienced, it is being felt that we are not able to cope up with the everyday usual environment. For example, Martha Nussbaum in The Upheavals of Thoughts talks about that. She's not phenomenologic, but her analysis of the grief are deeply phenomenological, and not only in philosophical texts, but also in the literature and many poems. We see that mostly the images of the people who are suffering from the grief, the loss, are mostly the world looks different for them. The way they are able to plug and plug with the environment, the able to cope up with the environment is not possible for them. They feel that the regular everyday task is something which is not so easily realized by them, so easily experienced like earlier. So at that time also we feel our body and our tasks as a weight, not as a something which enables us to do the things. Next slide. So the question here arises, which again has taken up by the Merleau-Ponty, that so does that mean that body makes us the prisoner of our past? Does it mean to say that we cannot experience the new things, because whatever our experience is always mediated by our past habitualities or the experiences we had? Because at the same time, as we have discussed the phenomena of the magic and the phenomena of the new phenomena, how is it possible? So Merleau-Ponty in his book Invisible and the Visible, he talks about the flesh. So he said this flesh has the double sensations. What is that? He talks about that. He gives the example that suppose, which we can experience right now also, suppose if my left hand touches my right hand, so I feel that after some time, not only I feel that my left hand is touching the right hand, but at the same time, it is also getting touched. So left hand is not only touching the right hand, but also getting touched by the right hand. So in the same way, we can say that the right hand is also touching the left hand and it also getting touched by that. So this he called as the reversibility thesis. When the flesh has this reversibility, when the left hand touch right hand, so after some times it feels the double sensation, not only of touching, but also getting touched. So this he called as the characteristics of the flesh, double sensation of flesh. So all the time we not only touch the word, but also get touched. So here the example of here is a picture of the fingers touching the water in perhaps in river or in a pond. So at that time, it is not only the touch of the sense of touching the water, but also getting touched by that. So in that way, word also opens us towards newness and it transforms us. So, so this is what Merleau-Ponty says, that we cannot define the embodied subjectivity only on the basis of the touching. it is something midway overlapping of the touching and the touch where the embodied subjectivity is felt. Next. So now coming back to the present time. So as we have seen this COVID-19 and the kind of the experience, especially apart from the medical issues, but it had the long impact on ours, has a profound, deep impact on our social life, where there is a social distancing, people cannot meet each other. All the time we have to wear the mask, can't touch as usual we used to. So this picture actually shows the perhaps the mother and son sitting together, and they are not looking at each other. Otherwise, it would have been the very warm situation. So, but they are totally. So they are not clearly the picture show they are not being at home here. So we can say that this COVID-19 and the disruption of the embodied possibilities, that COVID-19 has disrupted the embodied possibilities of I can, which we can project on the world. Now, for now Husserl and Merleau-Ponty, they say actually we experience ourselves, our embodied possibility as a I can. That when I'm sitting here in this room, so I know what I can do. I can attach my arm and pick up this bottle, but I cannot jump out of this window and pick up something. So our experiences shows us that these are the embodied possibilities which we can project on the world, some of which we can realize, some of which we cannot realize. Now the COVID-19 has disrupted this embodied possibilities, where I can stretch my arm, pick up the bottle, but at the same time I feel that there might be a virus in there, so it can infect me, so I desist from it. So similarly, I can hug a friend, but I cannot do that because I know that might be he has certain cough and then I can also get infected. So this has impacted our life profoundly. So we can say that pandemic word has become a kind of the constrained coiled up word. We have become like a coiled up in ourselves. So this is what I want to propose, that there can be, that in this COVID-19 we can experience that there is a paradox in the lived body. And what is that paradox? That on the one hand, we project, our lived body can project the possibilities on the basis of the past experiences or the lived experience. But at the same time, we cannot realize these possibilities because of the pandemic situation. For example, it is neither the able body, which can like everyday regular, like in the non-pandemic times where I can easily realize the possibilities of my day. I can go wherever I can like, I can touch whatever I feel like to touch, most of the things. And nor it is a disabled body like the amputated body, or where it cannot do certain tasks without any prosthetics or certain kind of the external aids. So what is the ontology of this body? What can this body we can say? So I feel that this body we can call as the folded body. That our body is in the COVID-19 has become a kind of the folded body. The bodies which are like a fold up in itself. I cannot hug, touch and reach out to the others like earlier. But at the same time, these are the possibilities I can realize. If the opportunities are there, if there would be the non-pandemic time, then I can easily realize these possibilities. But right now in the pandemic situation, I cannot realize these possibilities, even if I have the capacities, because there can be the fear of the pandemics and the new discourses are coming about the spread of the pandemic or the situation. So these bodies become the folded bodies. Next. So this brings us to the to the phenomenological conception of the health. So health is something which has been largely ignored by the philosophers, especially in the Western philosophy. But there are some philosophers like Gadamer who talks about the health. So Gadamer called this as the equilibrium. That health is basically the feeling of the equilibrium in his book Enigma of the Health. So equilibrium, harmony, or kind of the well-being you feel in the world. So this is actually when the being in the world, the person who is in the world, he experienced that kind of the equilibrium, that we can say that he feels health, he experiences health. So the loss of, so now in the loss of pre-reflected trust in the world and the dismantling of the habitual confidence in the world has disturbed the equilibrium, which is health. Now this is, now we need to connect this COVID-19 times with the phenomenological conception. Because according to the phenomenology, and which we have tried to explain through the notion of the lived body, that there is a pre-reflected trust in the world. I know because of my past experience, how can I reach out to the others? How can I do? So this has been a everyday, regular, normal experiences. But now, because of the new discourse of the health and the pandemic situation, I cannot realize these possibilities, because this is the fraught with the danger. So this resulted in the dismantling of the habitual confidence in the world, and it has disturbed the equilibrium, which is called health. So according to Gadamer, health is an equilibrium or the harmony which is felt. So this situation has disturbed that harmony. So folded bodies, so we have become a kind of the folded bodies which cannot inhabit the space and reach out to the other the way lived body does. So earlier the lived body could reach out to the other, they can do most of the things, but they on the basis of their past experience. But these folded bodies cannot inhabit the space. Even if they inhabit the space, they will coil up themselves. They will, like if we move in the public spaces, we will not touch the others, we will keep the mask, we won't be able to breathe if there is some very beautiful natural place. So unlike earlier, I find we will find difficult to breathe in deeply because of the fear that I can inhale the virus inside myself. So this is folded bodies kind of coil up themselves or fold themselves, and they do not stretch them out in the spaces. So this loss of the habitual confidence, embodied freedom, homeliness make the world uncanny and disrupt the phenomenological belonging to the world. Because according to the phenomenological notion of the health, that the being in the world experience the health basically on the basis of this embodied possibility, where their healthy body does not enables you to realize all the kind of the projects all the kind of the tasks you project in the world, while the ill body, illness, they cannot do so. So this loss of the habitual confidence in the world, that has disrupted this phenomenological belonging to the world, where we feel the world at home in the world. So feeling, so there are, I know there are certain, some of my friends and some of other people, they are doing certain field work and the interviews of the people in the COVID-19 times, and most of the places, most of the interviews are also revealing this, that people feel actually kind of uncanny in the world, not being at home, lot of the psychological complications, anxiety, and some other kind of there is also staining of the inter-subject relationship. On the other hand, there are the people who says no, there are, because this internet, online things has opened up the new possibilities. But still, I would say that even after, of course, the internet and this online platform has opened up the large possibilities of interacting with each other, but it cannot be equated with the actual embodied interaction. So here again, we feel, so even in the online platform, we are like a folded bodies, because unlike the actual conference room, I cannot go to reach toward the other, cannot do most of the things which my embodied possibility would have made makes possible. So feeling healthy is the phenomenological experience of feeling equilibrium in the world. So folded bodies cannot experience the equilibrium like the lived bodies. So, so this feeling of the health is like the feeling of the subjective first person experience of feeling equilibrium, where you feel the world as a kind of the relief, where you can like where you feel at home. Like for example, Gadamer's, I would quote Gadamer, So he says that like health is not a health is the condition of being involved, of being in the world, of being together with one's fellow beings, of active and the rewarding engagement in one's everyday tasks. So clearly these kind of the things are not available because of this pandemic situation. So the health cannot be experienced the way the lived body actually experience the health. The folded bodies as like ours, they cannot experience the equilibrium because their very mode of existing in the world is kind of the derivative of this actual phenomenological full experience of the fullness. So, so this is actually what I have in the mind. So this is of course work in the, as I again mentioned in the previous in the beginning, at the outset I have mentioned that this is actually work in the progress, and actually for the my further research I have to see that how this bodies in the COVID-19 time, how it relating to the others, and I have to do more kind of interviews, field and analyze the experiences, that how the people are actually interacting with each other, how it is affecting their subjective sense of the self. So this, of course, I would welcome the comments and criticism from you on this theme. So yeah, thank you for this. Can you, yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the wonderful lecture. So now we are going to take some comments, some suggestions, some questions from your side. So you can type that out in the chat box. And if you want to speak, you can just raise your hands. Either you can type that also in the chat box, or you can raise your hands. Okay, Aarti has a question. Aarti, is your video on? Yeah. Yeah, Aarti wants to speak. Yeah, Aarti, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I can't put on the video, sorry. Is that okay?
It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. Please go ahead with your question.
Yeah. So I really loved the lecture because it gave me a framework for my own experience, language for my own experience, and thank you for that. I have also been practicing in mental health and trauma, and trauma is something we always say that it's stored in the body. So our practice is when it's embodied, that's when you release, like no matter how much you talk, and it doesn't get released until you really feel it in the body, in the physical sensation. So my question is, like, from a philosophical point of view or from your experience, is there anything that you can suggest that if somebody is not experiencing equilibrium, especially let's say with mental health like depression, anxiety, etc., where what is normal for somebody else, for a lot of people, but they're not able to do even say simple tasks, like this is something I experience, something that I know my body can literally get out of the bed and it can make myself a cup of tea. I know this in a logical sense, but in a lived body sense, it doesn't feel like it can. So there is a breakdown in health and societal relationships, and my relationship with life and my relationship with that I can feeling that you mentioned. So is there something that you would say from this philosophical point of view that you can do to kind of get to that I can, and also in this pandemic situation also to kind of cope with whatever is there any way to get there when you're not feeling that?
So thanks for this question, and I think this question is actually a lot of the profound implications it has, and I really need to think about some of its aspects, because one of my like limitation is that because I'm not professional in this psychiatry and doesn't know much, so I know about the theoretical frameworks, but this kind of the
I think there's a network glitch. Okay,
yeah.
sir is back. Yeah. Okay, sir.
So I would like to say that one of the experience of the trauma in the Husserl we find and apart from in the limit experience actually. But coming back to your question about how situation where I feel that that intellectually I can feel that I can do this, but actually I don't do that. So I think from the Merleau-Ponty point of view, this is actually because of certain kind of the traumatic situation where there is a kind of disruption with the left body and the present body. So the present body is fine, but because of certain kind of the experiences, which as you said, have gathered on the left body, so it is not able to actually realize because it has to cope up with that. So this is actually what I can say.
Okay, thank you, sir. I would invite BC Thomas, sir, Thomas BC, sir, just to make a comment. Sir, can we see you? So you have been unmuted.
Yeah.
Thomas, yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Dr. Saurav.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, I am very grateful to you for your lecture.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Good.
Thank you.
But the lecture has got a terrible lot of lacuna. In fact, the notion of the body in phenomenological analysis begins from Husserl's 2 or 3 basic books. One is called Thing and Space of 1907. Then Basic Problems of Phenomenology, 1910-11. And the most important treatment of body comes in Ideas 2.
Yes, yes.
And whatever you have mentioned about what is called Merleau-Ponty is nothing but a repetition of what Husserl has been doing.
Yes, yes.
You mentioned Husserl's name only once, whereas the whole lecture should have been on Husserl and Husserl alone, because he is the one who started with the analysis of the body. And he has got such a lot of notions on notion of body, and you have not included anything of that kind. And well, in fact, even when you speak about what is called Heidegger's equipment and things like that, you spoke about the Walken equipment and revelation. Well, Heidegger is not really speaking about the body.
Yep.
He's not. He's in fact. Well, I'm sure that look, the word body is completely absent in Heidegger's being and time.
Of course.
Totally absent.
Yes.
Yet you are attributing as if the Heidegger has been speaking about body. He is speaking of being in the world.
Yeah.
He is speaking of being in the world. And again, when you are speaking of what is called enigma of what is Gadamer, Gadamer is merely expanding what Heidegger has been said. All of them are in one way or the other. They are all dependent on Husserl, and poor Husserl has been left out completely.
Yes, yes,
Thank you.
yes, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah.
Yes, sir. Please, sir, please make a comment if you would.
Yeah, so of course, thank you, sir, because I will tell that Professor Thomas is like leading phenomenologist of India, and he's also the chairperson of like the Phenomenology Society of India. So his comments like very welcome. But again, sir, very briefly, I think most of the points you have are like at the head on. But I would like to mention a couple of the things. Of course, we should give the because all the work, especially idea tools, are like posthumous, which are actually idea tools are actually not published during Husserl's time, and it's a posthumous book. And of course, I say many people say that he has come into contact with the Merleau-Ponty and Dennett, but it's still like this idea of the embodied intentionality is in Husserl, but the notion of the flesh and this intertwining and the chiasm, which is in the Merleau-Ponty's work, which I don't think that we have in Husserl. And you are right, actually, Heidegger doesn't talk about the body, but of course he talks in the Zolliken seminars about the body, where he discusses the psychiatries and all that. And so my point in the Heidegger's, to bring in Heidegger's equivalential context, just to highlight the point that our access to the word is basically the non-conceptual. And it doesn't require the conceptual and the propositional theoretical framework in order to enter into the world. So how this framework is actually also, this is a larger phenomenological framework, which is also available to, which is also endorsed and to Merleau-Ponty. But thanks for your comment. I would really, I would ponder on it.
Yeah. So we'll proceed with the next question. Mr. Praveen has a question. So you have raised your hand in the chat box. Yeah, please proceed with your question.
Good evening, sir.
Hello.
So am I audible to you?
Yeah, you are audible.
So like I have two questions. First question is about the case of a newly born child whose leg is amputated and it's new. Like it has no past experience. Once it is born, I amputate the leg. Will it have that amputated, the feeling of that amputated leg in the future? Because there's no past experience, right? There should be no dichotomy of the future and all such things. The question is about, so suppose I am an alien who is coming to the earth for the first time. I see a mango tree and I see the tree, the leaves, everything for the first time. That's my first experience. And I stay here for a month. And will it not be possible for me to see the mango tree, the same things as if I've seen for the first time? Will my past memory always prevent for me to do that? That's it.
First, your voice was breaking, so I don't know I got your question correctly, but what the little bit I understood, the first question is of the newly born child, that he doesn't have the past experience. How can he like experience the world? So according to the like phenomenologists, that we don't need a kind of the very reflective ego or the self in order to experience that. It should come as the conceptual content, and then I say, okay, I have the knowledge. It can be very pre-reflective kind of the experience, like in the terms of the touch, smell, all these things that can become the part of the experiences. So experiences like the wider category than the cognition and like the conceptual knowledge. Second, about the mango, if I see it as a first time, the thing is that according to phenomenology, that and this is very famous and psychology also, that we always interpret the things in a context. The same line on the basis of the background, the things look differently. So this Gadamer called as the hermeneutical circle. He used in the tags, but it was also the feature of our being in the world, of our understanding, that we throw a context. Actually, we project a whole or a context and we interpret the part on the basis of it, and our understanding grows, we again reinterpret the whole context. So this is actually the way which of course is first of all told by Heidegger. It is something this is our notion of how we understand the word and how we go about in the world. So this is actually what I can say from phenomenological point of view. I don't know.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'll request Amrita Vali to please say her question. Yeah, please proceed with your question.
Good evening, sir, and thank you for your lecture. I just had one point that I'm hoping that you can clarify for me, which is with your example of the left hand touching the right hand and the reversibility hypothesis. So applying that to our social distancing situation and the fact that you don't have access to the other, so I can still hug myself, I can still touch myself, I can reach out to myself. Why is it that my experience still feels lacking? Because of the reversibility hypothesis, I should feel that I am being hugged as well as hugging.
Okay.
Is it that my awareness that I know I'm doing it to myself, that concept in my head that I'm doing it to myself, does that differentiate this experience, me hugging myself, from somebody else hugging me?
Yeah, but that is an interesting question. But do you think that hugging is a kind of, can one hug oneself? Because hugging is basically the way phenomenologically we experience the hugging. The hugging is basically reaching out to others, because it's just like one cannot tickle oneself. So similarly, it is very like it is, you need the other in order to tickle you. So similarly, the hugging is the kind of, it will be very kind of the it is not a correct definition of that. It is a lacking definition of the hugging. So, but yes, you are right actually that we also need to think that how in the social context, we have to think of the touching and touch relationship. And I think the literature and many things does that only, that how these things actually can take out one of the one can take out from one's chamber of the self, one's like a cocoon of oneself and reach out to the others.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, before we proceed further with some more questions, I'll request Dr. Shankar Rajaraman, who's a psychiatrist by training and a poet at heart, and also a postdoctoral scholar at NIAS, to say a few words. Shankar, sir, are you here? Ashwini, can you request Shankar, sir?
Yes.
Yeah, sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Saurabh, for this fascinating talk. I come from a background of Indian philosophy and Sanskrit, so my understanding of phenomenology is rather very partial, mostly gleaned from discussions with you. But let me summarize your talk a bit. You spoke of how embodiment is a precondition for experience, and experience is limited by the bodies we occupy. But even within this limitation, there is growth, and the world always transforms us. You brought in the concepts of intentionality and lived body in your talk, and then discussed about how taking COVID-19 as an example, how it has disrupted our embodied possibilities. You also brought in the concept of folded body and spoke how COVID-19 has resulted in a folded body as contrasted with the lived body, and then the concept of health as equilibrium and has habitual confidence in the world, which is again disrupted by infections like COVID-19. Thanks a lot for the talk. I would just like to pose a question from the Indian philosophical background. Is it from an Indian philosophical background, is it possible actually to overcome the limitations posed by our embodiment and have experiences that our normal bodies wouldn't allow?
Yeah, of course. Dr. Shankar actually, Dr. Shankar is like a very, I think I'm also a fan of Dr. Shankar in terms of the vast knowledge he has, and always I learn a new thing. So this is also a very interesting question, because some of the work which I'm trying to do actually is that, and there are some works are already that how this actually the yogic experience is not the metaphysical Indian philosophy, like which is think the things in a like of the conceptual manner, but there are like the yogic kind of practices like the pranayama, some hatasans, and some other kind of the different kind of the exercises. They actually we feel the body in the quite different ways. So this can, I think, the phenomenology and especially Merleau-Ponty has a lot of potential to actually analyze and explore in direction. So thanks for the question.
Thank you, sir. Would you like to ask more questions? Oh, okay, sir. Dr. K. Om Narayanan Rao, sir, are you here?
Yeah, okay.
Sir, would you like to tell your question? Dr. Rao? Okay, I'll just read out his question to you, Saurabh, sir. The question is matter conscious? Touching and being touch experience somehow point to consciousness in matter. Your views on this?
Okay, so this, of course, I can't answer because.
So you're muted, yeah.
So this is a very difficult, I think this is a conundrum actually, whether matter is conscious or not. But the context in which I was using the touching and getting touched is that that is what Merleau-Ponty says, that actually the body, this is the analysis of the flesh. Actually, the flesh is something which is not something which is only can be expressed in this body only. So he says that in the touching and touch, there is the overlap between the things which you touch and touch. For touching a tree or touching a leaf, so there is some kind of the word he used is the intertwining of the flesh. There is something where the flesh of the flesh is something which actually encompasses both individual and object, which he doesn't use. So he actually, through the touching and touch, he want to overcome this Cartesian divide of the subject and the object. So, so yeah, that is.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, Dr. Chakrabarti, ma'am, are you here? Would you like to say your question aloud? Okay, I don't see her active much. Okay, I'll just Dr. Pushya wants to ask a question. Pushya, ma'am, please go ahead.
It's not a question so much. I just wanted to thank sir because I'm not at all exposed in any way to phenomenology. And I think with the anecdotes that you spoke about, and also the whole theory of reciprocality, and forgive me if I get the terms wrong, but I think it came alive to me in a very nice way. And I just want to thank you for the lecture, sir.
Thanks, Dr. Pushya. It's always nice to hear you, always.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Dilip has a question. Why is that some people are naturally inclined to dance, but some are not? Hi. Sir, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure actually can fall in the ambit of my talk, but this is a good question actually. I need to think on it actually. So this can be a very, yeah, so right now it's very difficult to comment on that.
Oh, okay. Okay, sir. Yeah, there are some more questions, sir. So I think Thomas sir wants to say something. Sir, I've unmuted you. Please go ahead with your question.
Yes. Dr. Saurav, I want to ask you, or I want to comment on 2 points.
Yes, sir.
A gentleman a little while ago spoke about consciousness and body and things like that. You know, I mean, the point is that, look, from a phenomenological point of view, you cannot speak of what is called, well, a body, the consciousness of a living body. But whereas, from the point of view of Sri Aurobindo, you will say that even material objects are conscious, but in a dormant state. This is one thing which I wish to, I mean, you had no knowledge of Sri Aurobindo. I am from Pondicherry, I know about that.
Yeah.
Consciousness in a dormant state. Phenomenology does not speak of that kind of a consciousness.
Yeah, of course, of course. So did I say that that matter is conscious?
Excuse me, I couldn't hear you, please.
Sir, that is, yeah, so, but I don't, did I say that matter is conscious or in the dormant?
No, no, they will not say matter is conscious.
Yeah, of course, they won't
Nothing
say
about consciousness of matter. In fact, when Heidegger speaks of the so quote unquote dead Dasein, this is a transition has taken place at the end of the show.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
But where now, secondly, well, there has been a lot of talk about touch and being touched and so on.
Yes.
This is a typical Husserlian example for that. Husserlian example that, look, it is reversibility of what is called the perceiver and the perceived. Perceiver and the perceived. So Husserl who started with it. And later on, you find even that Strawson speaks a lot about that. Strawson in his book Ideals, Individuals, speaks about that. But Strawson, well, if I am not mistaken, Strawson uses the name of Husserl there. Husserl speaks of that kind of a thing. Can I continue, please?
Okay. Sir, there are more questions. Can we come back?
I stop here. So
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry to cut you short, Professor Thomas. There's a question by Vishnu. Mr. Vishnu?
Yes, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah. Please go ahead with your question.
I'll go on video. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much for your lecture, sir. Really enjoyed this. Now, my question is, I'm a martial artist, and I have a question. Lived body is something that you've experienced, the touch, the sensibility, sensitivity, and all that. Folded body, can I say it is the fetal position? The body which was once lived, wherein you don't experience much, and then later on you experience things. Can I call it that way? Can I interpret it that way?
Can you again body? What is like?
A lived body is?
Yeah, that I understood. Folded body, how do you define it?
I just want to interpret it as a fetal position.
Okay.
The fetus.
Okay.
It is folded, right? So I would think of that as a folded body, folded experience.
Okay.
If I can interpret it on that level, can I say that the body already experienced the folded, and right now, even though the COVID situation has brought us to the folded body experience, we should still be able to cope it? Can I interpret it that way?
Well, that is an interesting analogy, but still actually, because the thing is that lived body is something which you correctly interpreted. Folded body, this is something which I'm thinking over. So that folded body is something so I'm just thinking that in the COVID-19 time, so there is a disruption between the lived experience, the possibilities, the kind of the possibilities we project on the world, and we can't realize it because of the pandemic situation. So body is not a disabled body, like the fetus doesn't have the lived experience, because it will have the lived experience when it will come unfold itself. But here we have the experience, have the capacity, but we are not able to do that.
Experience.
To do that. So this creates a disruption between that. So I was just trying to think in that line.
Okay.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Vishnu. Can I request Mr. Jasper to please proceed with this question? Sir, are you here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So thank you very much for the lecture and for the chance to ask this question. When we speak about folded body, I think we must also mention about Dr. Edith Stein, who had worked her doctoral dissertation with Edmund Husserl, especially her evaluation and doctoral dissertation project regarding the notion of empathy. The very notion of folded body is very constructively criticized. I think the folded body is always disrupted by the notion of empathy. So, especially in the scenario of COVID-19 pandemic, the notion of empathy is very much needed, I think. And in light of Edith Stein's project of empathy, this question can be addressed. This is a comment, not a question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, just for that. And I really like this because I have not read Edith Stein's work, but of course she is one of the leading great, like the woman phenomenologists, and we all know about her biography and the life of hers. And this is interesting that how the empathy can project the possibilities of again being with actually, and to unfold itself. So that is interesting that how in the pandemic situation, the both of these can, because while I see that the lived body and the notion of the flesh, while the folded body is not something like which is like the ultimate thing. So at the same time, because it is a body, because it is not a thing. So body, because by virtue of its like experience, like the touch and the empathy, it can always open up itself. So this is thank you very much for this comment.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Mr. Jasper, for the question. As we are running a little short of time, we'll just take one last question for today's session. So the question is by Mr. Sanjoy. He asked, hello sir, according to your words and thoughts, I understand phenomenology is the study of subjectivity. our body makes us as a being in the world or being of objective space. My question is, what is the role of our body to make the intersubjectivity between one and the other? We are all subjective beings, so being with one another makes us being in the world. What is your opinion, sir?
All right. So, first, what I would like to say, thanks for the question. That actually, according to Merleau-Ponty, this is the embodied being which makes up the being in the world. While in the Husserl Heidegger, body is not the primal. While for Heidegger, it is the disclosure. Actually, I come in the world. My practical context actually makes me the being in the world. And this being in the world actually. Another mode of the human being, which he called as Dasein, is the being with one another. So this is also actually the part of the being in the world, that we are not find ourselves with the things and with the engaging with the object, but also with one another, which Heidegger called as the Mitsein or being with.
Thank you so much, sir. So I'm afraid we have come to a conclusion of today's session. We have a little exceeded our time limit. So, but please note that all your questions has been noted. If they're not if they're unanswered, we'll share Saurabh sir's email ID with you, and you may personally contact him as well. So thank you so much for your participation today, and on behalf of Team CSP and also on behalf of Professor Sangeeta Menon, we thank you all for your participation, and a special thank to Saurabh sir and Shankar sir for chairing this session. And for the upcoming lecture, Friday lecture, we have an interesting topic for you, which is emotion, cognition and consciousness. Which is from a perspective of Indian philosophy and aesthetics. The lecture will be taken by a professor from JNU, Professor Dhananjay Singh. So we'll see you once again with another Friday lecture in the upcoming Friday, a new speaker and a new lecture. So thank you so much for joining with us today. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for all. Thank you, Niharika.
Thank you.